Okay, so thank you everybody for being here for this presentation. Thank you for allowing me, Oliver Lehman, to be part of this special event, and my condolences to the families that have experienced loss in this tragedy in Turkey. Oliver asked me to speak on VUCA. I said, I want to speak on sustainability. So what do we do as project managers? We just pull things together and we find a common ground. My presentation today will be focused on how you, as a project manager, can look at some of the, sorry, I have a new PC that's very sensitive, how we can look at the sustainability factors and how we can look at it from a point of view of if you are thinking about or you are in business. I have my own business and I am really keen on advocating that people look at opportunities to be their own boss and to be in control of their own destiny. So thank you so much for being here. We're going to focus today on issues related to project managers, issues related to project management. Some of you or many of you are connected already to me on LinkedIn. I like to focus on what's not working and how can we make it better. So we're going to look at some problems and areas in project management, not getting political. Okay, so don't get nervous and feel like this is going to be something you need to turn the system off on. We're going to look at some solutions and look at some successes. I'm also going to give you a call to action. The call to action is I would like at the end of my presentation that you put in Slido or you put in chat something that you feel is important that you can do to make a difference. We call ourselves change agents. So what are we doing? How can we make sure that we're leaving a footprint that matters in this world? Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm Elaine Jackson. I live in Massachusetts. I have a 95% success rate in helping people pass their exam. That doesn't come easy. It comes from me harassing people, chasing them down, sending them notes over and over till they just get so fed up. They're like, oh my God, let me just go take this exam and be done with it. Then they send me notes of crying. I'm so happy. And I say, yeah, so what? So at this point, I want to share just a few things. I have a PMP Stories workshop. I do math workshops as well as masterminds and speakers mastery. So I'm looking at how I can be different than other project managers. How can I offer things that are needed so that everyone is not offering the same thing? I also do gardening and martial arts and fencing. Oliver Lehman knows a lot about my ability to fight, so we won't talk about that here. So sustainability, you may be thinking, well, is it putting the green, the glass in the glass container and the cans in the can container? It is nothing like that. Okay, so sustainability is really looking at how are we getting balance on the things that we produce. And when we produce it, how are we using it? How are we using the resources? And then also looking at how can we make sure that we are taking those resources and then making sure that they are replaceable. And so by doing that, I want to make sure that people understand sustainability is really looking at how do we balance what we're doing in the world. And some of you may be thinking, well, you know, this sustainability, it's a hoax, it's not real. But then when you see something happen wrong in the world, you really become very concerned for the matter. You become very wondering what's going to happen. So it's important that you understand that there are factors going on and it's all driven by us as humans. I have some pictures for you to look at. Some of them are going to make you feel really good. Some of them are going to make you feel really questionable as to what have I done to this planet? What have I done to cause this? What can I do different? And I want to encourage you. I'm not going to encourage you to go out tomorrow and start a business, quit your job. This is not what it's all about. It's about how can you, where you are now, do better in your life, with your family, with your job, with your community. Those people that have spoken earlier for the last couple of hours, they're all focused on how do we as a community of humans, citizens of the world, do different, do better. So these young girls are swimming, they're having a wonderful time, they're not crying, right? Now look at this picture, right? This is an area where there's a lot of trash. Why is this little boy in this water pulling this bag with things he's been collecting? Who told him this was okay to do? Why is this being allowed? The person who took this picture, like, I almost feel mad at the person that took the picture. It's almost as when you see children that are hungry and someone's taking their pictures, like the person taking the picture was probably eating, like, come on, so it's important to understand that there are areas where you could make a difference. There are areas where we need to be paying attention. And I'm going to give you a short list of these sustainability development goals. I think I saw someone showing pieces of that earlier. And you're going to be able to pick some area that calls to your heart. Now, I know some of you are saying, oh, look at the turtle. He's so cute. He's swimming around, having a good life, living the best day, right? How about this turtle? This turtle, and this is all due to what we have done as humans, throwing things in the sea, not being responsible for how we act in the environment. When we go picnics or we go on boating, throwing this materials into the sea and then realizing after you see it on TV, it's like, oh my God, am I responsible for that? Now, there are areas in the world, they call them garbage patches, but there are areas throughout the world where, it's not that just in the United States. Some people say, oh, those Americans, they're always throwing out trash. And you go to other places in the world and you're finding the same thing where there are garbage patches in the sea where people have thrown garbage, and because of the gravitational pull and the tides and ebb and tides of the water, that there are areas where there's just pure plastic, tons and tons. They're finding anywhere from 7 to 35 tons of plastic in the sea in these garbage patches. And animals are getting caught up in it. Animals are getting diseased. They're eating the plastic. And then what happens when we end up eating fish or produce that has garbage or toxic waste in it? We end up getting sick, and then we wonder, why did I get stomach cancer, or why am I sick from the pollutants in the air? It's all based on what we have done. And one of the worst things that I have talked about, the PMI chapter in Peru, I gave a presentation on behavioral norms and behavioral issues on projects. Sometimes we don't treat each other well on projects. We turn around and not take the time, to be kind and to, be patient with one another. And here's a picture of that. The manager yelling at the employee, and he just puts his head down like, not again. Oh my God, you can almost feel his despair. These things happen, and some of you may be thinking, I've never seen that happen. It happens on projects. It may not have happened to you or in your environment, or maybe not yet. Maybe you haven't worked long enough or gone to enough projects where somebody gets pissed off at their wife at home and comes to work and takes it out on everybody. And so how do you handle that? How do you manage that? How do you manage your career through all of that? Also, other areas of risk and concern. And we're going to get to the VUCA factors, because maybe that's what everybody came for, this little flags waving VUCA. But the thing is that it's more than just projects that relate to the customer. It's things that affect the world. And when we talk about vaccinations, it's not about to vaccinate or to not vaccinate. It's how do we make sure that people that are doing the testing, people that are doing the reporting are reporting responsibly, not telling lies, not having a hidden agenda. And so what I'd like for people to do, I don't know the code for Slido, and I don't know if I have a code, but I'd like for everybody to go to Slido, because I've been told to encourage people to do that.
Yeah, I have it. I will share it now.
So if you can see the code, I'm assuming it's in the chat, put it in the Slido tool. And I would like for you to type maybe a few of the things that you're experiencing in projects that are issues. This is not about pointing fingers. It's not about, you're telling on anybody. But if you don't talk about it, you can't expect anyone to fix it. If you don't address the issues, then it is that it stays there, and it just, for the next people that come, or maybe you'll walk off the job and you didn't have to leave that job. Where are the bottlenecks? So if you can put that in Slido, and I'm going to see if I can, I'm going to give you like a minute or so to do that. Is that okay? Okay. So
So there you
the
go.
Slidos.
Yeah.
Okay, I see it. 259-2592671. And if you could, Ravinda, let me know if you see anything in there that you feel is important to share. Okay, so what we're looking for is, where do you find the concerns on projects? Or do you feel that everything is wonderful, is working to your advantage? So people answering anonymously, and that's good, because then there'll be more open clarity and expectations from the stakeholders. How do you get them? How do you get them to be more clear? How do you get them to be more transparent? Okay, and somebody said something about business acquisition. I'm not sure if that's part of this, 17 minutes ago. Awesome. Missing units of measure on what was done. So as a team member, don't you feel you should, that's part of lessons learned, not lessons learned, but the grounds rule meeting, that you say, well, this is what we need to have done in the beginning. And if the project manager forgets it, shouldn't we as part of the team say, hey, how do you want us to report? How do we know that you're happy with the results? Okay, so I'm going to move on. So when we get to VUCA, right, I went and I looked this information up, not only in the 7th edition, but it's out, that this information is actually out there. So whenever I read the material from PMI, I said, oh my God, PMI came up with a new term or a new lexicon. Well, actually, this term was in place since 1990, and it was used in the military. So a lot of the things that we do are coming from before in the military, or, from different industries that had to make some changes or some adjustments so that work could be done, smoother. So when we're looking at VUCA, we're looking at rapid changes in business environment. And we're looking at ways to target growing instability in the world. So let me go through, and I'm going to go through kind of quickly through some of these terms that are here and look at some of the solutions that I came up with. So when we look at volatility, right, we're looking at not knowing what you do not know. So if you have a lot of unknowns, that's important too. I get nervous when there's a lot of unknowns, because it's like, that's the one thing that could trip me up. That could be the one thing that'll cause me to lose my contract or lose my job. When somebody's a contractor, they're there for a short period of time. So when you are brought on a project as a contractor, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, it doesn't matter. The point is, when you're brought on, is because the fire has already started. You're not brought on in the very beginning. I'm sorry. You're not brought on in the very beginning to bring on the project and everybody's happy and you're getting together and knowing everybody. What's your name? What do you do? When you come on, that you're trying to be nice as a contractor, but you know that you have got to get some results very fast. You've got to not only get results fast, but you also have to be able to be a team player, try to get people on your side. So as a contractor, those of you who are full-time employees may not realize this, but as a contractor, we have got to, we try to play nice and get to know you, but the bottom line, all you care about is the results. And that's what we care about, making sure we deliver so that we can finish out the contract or get good results from the contract or get some kind of an accommodation for the next thing. So it's important not to fear what you don't know, but to also look and say, what other things can we do to make sure the unknowns are addressed? Maybe it's coming up with a plan B, maybe coming up with a plan B and a plan C. Uncertainty. So we're looking at the unknowns. Okay, what's not able to be predicted. So it's important to understand what's relevant. Okay, so we're looking at the positives and the negatives, but how do we make sure that we are understanding if it's uncertain and it can't be predicted, then what do we do? You may want to make sure that you're constantly addressing risk and making sure somebody's reporting it at all times. Sometimes maybe somebody left a team that did risk and you didn't replace that person and you moved that role to somebody else who's doing something else and they can't keep up. So they may drop something sometime or keep other work going at other times. So, they're doing the best that they can. But sometimes that's not good enough, especially if the project is one that impacts life. Maybe it's an airline industry project, or maybe it's something with clinical trials. So depending on the importance of the industry, it can be that you can't afford to have somebody running 5 roles at a time because every role that they're doing is critical and you need somebody totally dedicated to that position. If there are questions, please put it in the chat, or if I'm triggering you, which is good, that means I'm triggering you to think about things that have happened and how they can be better. These kinds of events should be leading you to fixing the problem or seeking a way to have a discussion. And I'm going to share with you some of the strategies that I feel are out there that you can possibly use to fix some of the problems that are on projects. So complexity, you're looking at areas where there are things that are different. And so one of the things we can look at is when they talk about uncoupling, talking about taking things that are very complex and breaking it down so that it's more understandable. Sometimes when you read something, right, some of my students that I teach, they read something and they don't understand it. They're like, well, I'm just going to gloss over it. And then next thing you know, they see it on the mock exam. They're like, oh man, I spent just a little second reviewing it a little more or looking at the words. Years ago, students used to learn Latin. For those of you that are old enough to remember that, they used to learn Latin. So when you see a word, you would break it down into the components from Latin or Spanish so that you would understand the root. And if you understood the root of the word, you could actually understand what the word meant. So that may be something that people need to do, is to try to get to the root of the situation. If there's any comments, please do put it in the chat. So ambiguity, we're looking at what is complex, what is not clear. Again, one of the things that I suggest my students do, especially when I work with the oil and gas industry, is to say, why don't we create a repository, a knowledge repository? I call it like a project management dictionary. And I use the terminology that we use in project management is to say, your position really is, you're really doing project management. But let's look at it from the point of, if it is that you don't understand what I'm talking about, let's see what you're talking about, how it agrees what we're talking about. How can we confirm that you really are doing project management? And many times the industry is that they're calling it something different. But in project management, we have a different word for it. But when you explain it, it's like, wait a minute, that's not that. That's a turnover. Like in change management, they call something called turnover in the oil and gas. So understanding, how can we make sure we're speaking the same language? Because if on your team there are different people speaking different languages, maybe they're not understanding, maybe when they pronounce the word, it didn't sound like how you learned the word, and you just thought, oh, they're meaning something else, or rolling wave planning or something, you assume, then you end up with the wrong information, or maybe even the wrong scope for the project. So are you getting the picture yet? Are you getting the picture? Meaning, are you looking in the mirror? Because you need to be thinking about who is responsible. Who is responsible for making sure that things are understood, that risk is properly identified? Yep, it is you. Looking in the mirror, there's nobody. When you look in the mirror, there is no one in that mirror but you and you. And you have to really be accountable to yourself to say, I've got to get the job done. I've got to do it right. Today's the day. And so when I talk about today's day, that's like looking at risk on projects and saying, okay, how can I make sure that I'm doing the right assessment, that I'm giving the right information, that I'm not making up things. Those of you who interact with me on LinkedIn, you know, I'm always sharing information about things that are going on in the industry. And many times the things that are going on, it's not really very nice because there are people that are sometimes not very nice to each other. They're, you know, sort of trying to get to the top position, and they want to be the only one to capture the flag. So you may want to say, isn't the laws here? And the laws really are the coming through from when we look at the ISO standards. So some of you may recognize the 21500 from project management. So in the chat, can you put just one for those of you who have ever seen on a building, like an ISO standard, ISO winner or ISO achieved, and there's a number behind it? Have you ever seen a building, I'm talking big buildings, and they have this banner on the top? I mean, that's like their badge of like, we did everything, we did right. We totally knocked the ball out of the park, that we followed the standards and we met this certification, and we're now, you know, rubbing their hand on their chest saying, hey, we've done it. And so the important thing here is to realize that companies that follow standards want to do business with other companies that are following standards. So why do I say that? Would you want to be with someone that's cutting corners and you always follow the rules, you always do everything, but now you're going to do business with somebody that's going to lower your standards? You're not going to do that. And so the reason I brought this here is just to remind you that there are this ISO, the International Organization of Standardization. There are these areas that companies want to achieve. And maybe within your company, you may say, hey, guys, why don't we try to make sure we're doing the right thing to get maybe that quality standard? We were talking about it years ago. That would be such a boost for us. Maybe it'll help our ratings in the stock market, or maybe get us more customers. It's just more things that we can talk about. So here is where I really want to drive the nail in for you guys. I want you to be thinking about these sustainability development goals. As a project manager, you know, these goals were established by the United Nations, and they had figured that by 2030, they would have a handle on a lot of these. Some of these they're doing really good on, as the world, right? The United Nations, they get together and have representatives from all over the world come together and talk about what's going wrong in terms of poverty, what's going wrong in terms of hunger, how can we make sure we're feeding people? But the issue is right now there's a shortage of food, meat, different wheat. Okay, so we need to look at that. Why is that happening? And why are there still people that haven't eaten? Like today is Friday, maybe some people haven't eaten for the last 3 days or something. Why is that happening? And how can you eat lobster and know somebody else is eating grubs? That's one of my main statements. Like something like, you know, I'm not going to eat grubs. And doesn't mean I need to eat from the top of the food chain, but the bottom line is that everybody should be able to have food that can sustain themselves. So I want you to take a moment. I'm not going to read all these out, but I want you to know that these sustainability development goals are here, they're real, and I want you to be thinking about, what can I do? Can I start a business in this area? The next project, I want to make sure it's related to clean water. The next project, I want to make sure it's related to marine life. I want to work at the science center and maybe go out on a boat and talk about keeping the sea safe so that the marine animals can be safe and healthy. And then when the fishermen go out, we're eating safe catches. I would like to talk now about some of the problems. So we just have a few slides left to go, and I am going through, do put stuff in the chat, and Ravinda will let me know if there's something that I need to catch. But
We have one, Elaine. We have one.
okay, do you want to
Okay.
address it now, or do you want to wait to the end?
Or we can wait, no problem.
You can wait. Okay, great. So when we talk about problems, where you are as a project manager, where we are, how we are in the workplace is how we are at home, and how we are when we go to a conference. So the reason I'm saying that, I'm sorry. Yeah, the reason I'm saying that is because, you know, as as a project manager, you're just not one way in one environment, then you become like schizophrenic and you turn into a totally different person in another environment. You are how you are. So when you see problems related to personal life, and then you go to your projects, how your project work, how you handle that at home is the same default process that you would use when you're at work. Some of these things here are just to give you an idea that there are issues out there and that they need to be addressed. You know, consumption of food. When I go out to eat, I try to only take what is exactly that I need. I don't have to take food and no, I don't want it anymore, throw it in the trash. When that could have been a meal, technically, if you think about it, that was a meal that somebody else could have eaten. So when you go to buffets, you know, you go on a cruise ship, you don't want to overindulge just because you can. Throwing food away, you should be feeling some kind of way, some kind of, oh my God, what am I doing? Now, what am I doing to the planet? What am I doing to the environment? When you make decisions on projects, okay, come back to these goals of what can I do to make sure I'm approaching life different, that I'm showing that I'm a change agent and that I'm showing an example for others. These are some of the work-related problems, right? Scope management, conflict of interest. Did you go on a project because maybe you were hoping that you could get some stock tips so you can then tell your friends to go buy before the company goes IPO or something, you know? So the thing is, are you cutting corners or are you doing the right thing? And when others cut corners, why do you get angry? And you were doing it too. So the thing is trying to live your life in a way that represents project management, even when you're not on the job. So there are stuff here that you know, my longer presentations, I normally go through some of these and I really get people to start talking and releasing some of the information that may be pent up. But I think it's important to understand that there are issues related on projects, and we can't really do good project management unless we bring that up. These next two slides, as you can see, these are all data. So you can contact me and I'll send you the slides. These are details about each of these goals. So if you're saying, I don't know, I like affordable and clean energy, but I like the water, I like the thought of helping what's below the sea, or maybe life on the land, making sure that the ecosystem is set so that some animals are not displaced. In Massachusetts, they have foxes showing up in Boston. You know, that's where I live. It's a norm, but we're in Boston. No, not a norm at all. And this is an exercise sheet I suggest that you print out and do one now. What are your feelings on no poverty, zero hunger, good health, well-being? And then do this again in January or in December. How have I grown since then? What are my thoughts on these areas? And see if maybe by December you have already picked something and you're working on a project with someone to travel. So in Slido, please put solutions that have not worked. What do you find? It doesn't work. It has not worked. Please stop making me do this. It doesn't work. So put some of your comments in Slido. And the reason I believe the PMI chapter is capturing some of these is there could be an opportunity for more presentations or workshops in the future. So I'll give you about a minute to do that. And for those of you that say, I don't want to talk about what's not working, it's too painful. Well, let's talk about what is working. Oh my God, the other day we did XYZ and it just was so great. I love my team. I love when people tell me they love their team. Oh, I love my manager. Oh, this is the greatest team. I hope we always work on projects together. Again, as a contractor, you don't always get that luxury. I put in the chat into the presentation, the global mega trends link. I see somebody else had talked about it earlier. I'm not sure if you need a PMI membership to make it open, but we talk about digital disruption and climate crisis. This was in the, I got this off of the PMI website. And I believe it's important to understand that, you know, with AI and you're talking about artificial You're talking not only artificial intelligence, but you're talking about virtual reality, artificial reality, understanding that these are going to be major pieces of what we are going to experience on projects. And you need to be able to be competitive. You have to be competitive, because if you want your projects to be seen as value added, or you want to make sure your projects are keeping pace with what everybody else is doing, you're going to very much have to make sure that you're addressing some of these issues or using some of the new technology. Now, post-pandemic approaches are important. People were working more from home. People were working not only more from home, but from work, but they have a home office. So knowing that your team needs to have the supplies they need in order to remain current, they also need the training. It's easy to assume that everybody's up to date on ChatGPT, but they're not. I mentioned it to someone the other day and they didn't even know what it was. And it's been around for the last, I say 3 months, 4 months, to my knowledge. It's probably around from before then. But understanding the key performance indicators related to climate change, understanding emissions, the importance of understanding greenhouse gases, and also in terms of the climate change. I noticed in the report, in this same report from PMI, that China and India are not set to reach their goal of carbon neutrality until 2060 and 2070. But what I question is, those are the areas that seem to have the most growing, or they're slower to recover from all of this greenhouse gases. So I would tend to think they try to do it sooner. So I'm not sure why them doing it later is going to be of any benefit, when we need this thing done sooner. We need the numbers to come down. We need people on board sooner. So I want to encourage you in terms of digital disruption. I am promoting gaming as a way of making sure people are up to speed on what they need to do as project managers. PMZone.com is owned by a project manager that was at the conference in December. And he has a gaming that allows projects to go, instead of losing money on your projects, act out your project on this game and have discussions and information about with your team, so that your team can then decide and figure out what they need to do to fix the project. Another game is doublemasters.com. That's another game that allows you to go through a project, understand what you need to do, what risk factors are available, should you use contingency or management reserves, and then turn around, and then it gives you a scorecard report on how your project is doing and how you could have done better. I suggest looking at ways that you can go through your project without spending that money up front and messing up the project and looking for a redo. Sometimes there is no time for a redo. So again, showing you this for the last time, I would like for you in Slido to just pick one of these and tell me why. And if you could, if you're interested in getting a copy of my presentation, love to give you the presentation. I also have a presentation on how to do public speaking so that you're not afraid from the stage. So send me a note, tell me which of these goals that you've chose and why, and I'll send you the presentation. So with that, closing out with just some more things to read. I'm always about giving education and sharing information. And because I have a degree in biology, I'm always leaning towards the sciences. So everyone, thank you so much for giving me your attention and engaging. And I'll turn this back over to Ravinda Singh. Thank you.
So Elaine, we have few queries in Slido. Maybe you can go through it, and yeah, we can help audience.
Okay, so I'm going to go from the top down.
Yeah.
How can we ensure that these environment factors can be explained to all nations on the ground and support them in tracking these challenges? Well, I think it's important to, one of the things that I heard recently is that they're saying that Africa should actually be given something, because they are actually adding value to the green gas, the greenhouse effect. They have so many trees and many areas that are not developed, and all of that greening is actually adding fresh oxygen and chemicals to the air. And so I was like, wow, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. And so I think it's important when they do a report is that, and I do see reports that are showing, United States and China, and they show Japan, and they show Germany, and they showing where the carbon footprints are, where the issue is, and how it's coming down. Some of the numbers have actually, some of the amount of contamination in the air and the greenhouse effect has actually come down when COVID, and they stopped all manufacturing, and people were like, stay in your house, everybody stay, it almost feels like house arrest. But then they saw the numbers go down. They were saying from the space, they could see it was clear. But then we slowly started to go back to work. So I do believe they have to do more sharing of those reports, maybe more children going on. We have this thing right now, it's called, what is it? They have in April, they had this thing where people go and pick up trash in the streets, but that's only one day. You have to do more. Somebody wrote, instead of improving, we go backwards. It's like one step forward and 10 steps back. The pressure has to come from those of us who are on projects, pressuring organizations that we work for, keeping it front and center when you talk. Maybe your auto signature in your email, I think, is so easy for people to forget. If like, I'm not hurting, then I'm not going to worry about it. But I think when there are people hurting in the world, you have to realize at some point it comes front and center, and it does come to your doorstep at some point or another. Thank you for your question. The other one says, for example, Germany stopped importing natural gas and resumed mining. Yes, I had heard about that, and closed coal mines. That itself is worrying. I can't speak to coal mines and the gas. And I think a lot of times is politics and money involved, and sometimes the people that have the most say are those with the most money. And that's why people take to the streets. People take to the streets, protesting, and then they show up to these political events and then stand up and grandstand and sort of try to make their voice heard. But this is the world for everyone, and we need to be able to speak out. Okay. Am I missing, Ravinda? Am I missing any of them?
No, we can go up. I think there are a few more.
Up. I am at the top. Okay, unless I missed something. The last one I'm seeing is instead of improving, we go backwards. So that's the last one I see at the top.
Okay, so you can go down then.
Down. Okay.
So there is one, how can we ensure that these environmental factors can be explained to all nations on the ground and support them in tackling these changes or challenges?
I think I had started to answer that. I believe it is putting those reports out on a regular basis. But if you're not in tune with what's going on, you can somebody can put a report out every day and you're not going to read it. Think about how it is you interact with LinkedIn, and somebody puts something, I don't want to read that, click, delete. So if people put their head in the sand and they're not wanting to pay attention, sometimes it's not until front and center, it's like people seeing the tsunami coming and they don't want to believe it. And they're standing there watching the wall of water coming. And then they're like, whoa, this is bad. But by that time, they can't outrun it. So, people have to take responsibility that when things get really bad, when could you have responded to that risk? Could you have done something? It's not about pointing fingers, about saying, well, you can take responsibility now, or like my dad used to say, you cry now or you cry later. Sometimes it's there's nothing you can do if people don't want to address it. It's just that those who do want to will have to bear the weight of carrying those who don't. That's how I see it. I can't say that there's any one solution when someone when some don't want to address it.
Mhm. And there is one more. It says problems related to food shortages. We all know that environmental changes as the earth warms more each year than the year before. How can we approach this in parallel to produce more crops or food?
Is that in the chat, or that's
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
the,
It's in the chat.
it's
If
in
you
the
go
chat?
down,
Let me
yeah,
just
maybe you
read.
can go down, you can say it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I didn't catch that. It's not in my chat. The chat for the conference, I'm not seeing that. So can you just basically summarize that again? You said something about food shortages.
Yeah, they say that you did highlight about the food shortages. There should be no hunger in upcoming goals. But in parallel, the environmental changes as the earth warms more each year than the year before, then how can we approach this situation instead of producing more crops? Means we are getting bad weather. So how can we tackle it?
Well, one of the things is there's a greed going on. There's some greed going on in terms of some companies want to be the one to handle the foods. They said the one who manages the food controls the world. So if the food channels, like in the United States, a lot of farmers were put out of business.
Mhm,
And I don't want to get political about it, but a lot of farmers are put out of business because they splice the gene so they can identify the gene of the seeds. And then when the seeds, people showed up with those seeds on their land, they told them, oh my God, you stole our seeds, we're going to shut you down. So there was some underhanded business that went on with that. So they're shutting down chicken farms and things like that. So it's there is a drive, and I can share some information, some articles on that if people want to see it. But there's a drive for getting some of the small farmers out of the way. And so when you have these small farmers that really care about sustainability, they care about having the food healthy, or they're looking at making sure that animals are properly cared for. And then you have these other mills that are just pumping out, animals that have just been fed and force fed, and they get big and then they slaughter them. I mean, that's something that has to be concerned with too. In the United States, there are people addressing it and talking about it, but I don't think it's maybe falling on deaf ears. It's
mhm,
falling on deaf ears. So then when people complain about it, then they say, oh, why are you complaining? Things are good. People
mhm.
who are outside the United States will say, oh my God, you guys have everything. But then when they come here and stay here for a while, they're like, oh wow, look what's going on. So there's just some issues that I can't talk about because I don't have enough knowledge. I don't have the reference to say this is it. Someone could actually say, oh, that's hearsay or made up information. So I don't have actual documentation to prove some of the things that I've been reading or that I know about.
Okay. So I see one more. It says, I think regarding those ISO certifications or numbers, these standards make sense and help us achieve our sustainability goals. Maybe a big organization can afford it. What about the small organizations?
Well, so you're right. So there's something called GRI reporting. And so that GRI reporting is a way that a company can report that their sustainability behaviors. And then they can show how are they doing in the various areas. So there's a company called greenprojectmanagement.org.
Mhm,
Greenprojectmanagement.org. I'm certified through them for sustainability certification. And what you learn through this company and this GRI reporting, many companies report their sustainability factor. Then this way you can go to that website and see what was the rating of that company. And then you can then say, I'm only going to deal with the companies that have these ratings. So
mhm.
they don't necessarily have that big ISO banner on top of their company, but the GRI reporting is important. Now, not all companies do it. Sometimes they buy into it and they do it, and then a couple years later, they get a new CEO and they back away from that.
Okay.
So it all depends on who's at the helm, right? Who's the CEO? Is it important to the CEO? When a new CEO comes on, it doesn't mean that they always adopt what was important to the employees from, from before. They may come in with their own agenda.
Okay. And there is one more, maybe I may not be able to explain, but it says that if we talk about sustainability, big nations, they all agree to it, they all coordinate and support, but somehow waste management, they export their waste to those nations which are not developed enough. So how can we tackle such situations?
It is
Maybe,
so.
yeah.
Let me understand. This person said that some developing nations pack their waste and ship it to smaller. Are they talking real waste? Are they talking about like bad people? Are they talking? I'm just trying to figure out. I have not heard where they ship waste and dump it on other countries. I haven't. I can put that out there on LinkedIn and figure out, people will tell me. I have not heard that.
Okay. Okay.
I'm wondering. I think when the person said waste, they mean something else.
Maybe
I think,
electronics or
yeah,
plastic.
yeah. In Turkey and some other places, no, it's not Turkey. It's someplace in Africa that they take the electronics and the people have actually gone and they're foraging for there's some sort of ore in the electronics and they're foraging for that, and so they're breaking the computers apart and pulling that out.
Mhm.
If that's what they talk about waste, yeah, I have heard of that. And they're probably looking at that as a way of helping people make money, but retrieving the resources in the computers. I've heard of that. And I don't know, is like sometimes something is good for one group and another group is not good for.
Mhm.
So I can't speak on that. I am concerned when they send children into mines to go and retrieve ores. I do feel that children have no purpose in working at that level, but in some countries, that's the children are what they use to go and bring the money back for the parents. So again, that's just another, that just tells you just how big all the comments that are coming from everyone. It just shows you how big this topic is. And what can you do? You may say, oh, I'm only a small person, I only have a certain resources. Just by talking to one person, two people, three more people, you just, it's like that communications channel formula, right?
Yeah.
You talk to two people and two people, next thing you know, a whole town is talking about it. So, and making it the radar where on the radar where someone says, oh, is that guy, he's always talking about sustainability.
Mhm.
In my town, this, go ahead.
It's like more of awareness factor. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then you become known for that kind of topic. Like I have in my neighborhood, there's a guy that always talks about fluoride. Fluoride is bad. It's in the water. It's doing this. It's making people sick. And every time people see him, they know him as the fluoride man.
Mhm.
But it makes you think, okay, what have we done since the last time he talked at the town meeting? What are we doing to make a change? This next generation is coming up behind us. They need to look and say, well, what have you done? And where can we take the baton and move it to the next level or move the needle forward? You can't just sit and let somebody else do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Is everybody complete? Does anybody need any more information? I'm not sure. The timing went, am I ahead of schedule or behind? I think I'm right within
We
schedule.
are, I think we are in sync. We are in sync. Even, now I do have, it's not a kind of a question. It's like just an observation because I read an article few weeks back that in India, especially where I belong to, so we used to have lakhs of eagles. They are a part of entire chain, right? to eat the disposed items or to dead animals. Now, in certain time period, animals are being fed with chemical elements or the crop which has more fertilizers. End of the day, how it impacted eagles, now they are in 100. Most of the eagle vanished or extinct because of that, those chemicals. Now that's really a concern because we are breaking the chain. We are breaking the chain and it is impacting not one, it everyone. So that's just an observation because I read an article. I thought, yeah, we have to
Well,
focus everywhere.
but that has happened in other areas where certain animals, part of the food chain is that they help keep other animals under control. So you may have to bring in import pigeons. Pigeons are like cleaners like that, or bring back some of the eagles to, people don't want certain animals, but then they realize that they served purpose. Getting rid of, like, we have bats, and the bats eat the ticks or eat the flies that are out there, or the mosquitoes. So sometimes you have to tolerate one group. And the fact that when they saw those eagles dying off, they should have backed off and come up with a more sustainable process. A more, maybe, in some pigeons, they used to have them where they send homing pigeons. You know what I'm talking about? They used to send them with a message and have them come back. That might be one of the options, is to have an animal that will be willing to go out in the night, kill or clean up, and then they come back to their homing station. I mean, but again, I'm not one to want to control animals. I let my dog do whatever he wants.
So we have
Yeah,
one
I'm
more.
not about.
We have one more example. It's like honeybees. Even their count is going down.
Yes, they are, and I believe, like, here in the US, when we see them, like I saw a huge one today, and I just stand back. I don't know if I'm allergic, but I stand back and I just the want to hit them to get them away is so strong. But then you're like, no, don't. And in a way, I do believe the bees even realize that they're at risk, because when you touch them, like when it gets winter out here and they're moving slow and you go to touch them, they don't try to, they know that, you're just touching them to play with them or something, but you're not going to hurt them. It's unfortunate because that affects the plants. It affects the fruits because they help cross-pollinate. And so that's one of the factors. Another thing is the polar bears. There's a lot of animals becoming extinct. So polar bears are having that issue too, with the polar ice caps are melting, and they're swimming in the water. They're not supposed to be swimming. It's supposed to be walking on the snow, on the ice.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a discussion that, I at one time tried to get like a sustainability discussion going every 2 weeks, have people read a book. People are like, I don't want to read a book. I'm like, how are you going to learn? And that's another topic. Maybe somebody else is covering that on the learning strategies that project managers need to employ to learn stuff. You can't just sit and listen to a webinar all the time. Sometimes you have to go back to old school of reading.
Okay, I think that's all we have. I will put some information about you. If anyone would like to discuss more, they can reach out to your LinkedIn profile or book a small slot with you.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, so Elaine, thank you for joining us and again enlightening us with your ideas. I really admire that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so thanks again, everyone. Let me close this session.